These are people who are incredibly extreme. They're some of the most extreme politicians in the entire country. 28 Senate Democrats have signed on to this. There's only 30 of them. So virtually the entire Senate Democratic caucus has signed on to Senate Joint Resolution 8204, which is a constitutional amendment. And I'll just read it again, as I discussed on the show. It says, the state shall not deny or interfere with an individual's reproductive freedom decisions, which includes the individual's fundamental right to choose to have an abortion, the individual's fundamental right to choose to use contraception, the individual's fundamental right to choose to use assisted reproductive technology, and the individual's fundamental right to be free from discrimination on the basis of the individual's pregnancy outcome. Nor shall the state deny or interfere with an individual's gender-affirming care decisions. Okay? So they put forth this constitutional amendment, which, look, it needs a 2/3 vote in the House and Senate. As large as their majorities are, they don't have it. I'm not 100% sure what their strategy is here. Part of me thinks that they're putting this forth so Republicans have to vote against it, so they can come out and say, Republicans are transphobes and Republicans hate women. So I guess maybe they're doing it for that reason. But as I said, we need to turn the script on them. Because what they've shown through this constitutional amendment is that every single one of those Democratic senators support abortions up to birth, gender surgery at any age, and no laws mandating parental consent or notice. So that amendment says more about them than it'll ever say about Republicans. So I put this forth, and I was the first one to put that messaging out there, that, hey, let's flip the script. With this amendment, you're saying you want no restrictions on abortions whatsoever. So that means you can have an abortion up to the point of birth. You want kids as young as 8 years old to be able to cut their breasts off or their penises off because they want to be a different gender because they've been indoctrinated in Washington public schools and their parents don't even have to be told about it. And I got, oh my gosh. So this goes out there. And I'll just say, look, I don't expect everyone to automatically understand how a constitutional amendment works, or to understand automatically the argument I'm making, that their constitutional amendment actually does these very extreme things. So in a Facebook post that I put up about this, there were all sorts of people just down my throat. The amendment doesn't say that. Point to me where in the amendment it says abortions up to birth and da-da-da-da-da. And so I took time to respond because, again, like, I get it. I took time to respond. And what I said to them on social media is the same thing I told you guys on the show when we broke this story, is that the language in there makes it very clear that these are, according to the constitutional amendment, fundamental rights, and that the government, shall not deny or interfere with them. The wording is very simple. It's very plain. The government, the state, shall not deny or interfere with these fundamental rights. So right there, because there's no other specificity involved, it renders every single law on our books that in any way denies or interferes with those fundamental rights unconstitutional. If this constitutional amendment passed, our current laws, which only protect abortion which ban abortion after the point of fetal viability, it would become unconstitutional. The laws that require for surgical interventions for youth, you have to have parental consent, it would automatically be unconstitutional. Now, it would have to be challenged, so it would take a lawsuit, but the very first lawsuit of someone, and it would take, all of 5 seconds for a progressive group, for Planned Parenthood to sue over our abortion laws that then would be in conflict with our state constitution, and they'd win in court. So that's the way this works. The constitutional amendment says the state shall not deny or interfere and calls these fundamental rights. Therefore, any existing law on the book that limits, restricts, denies, interferes with those fundamental rights is null and void, unconstitutional on its face. And I'm not here to debate anyone about that. That's just true. That's how these things work. The constitutional amendment supersedes anything in state law. You know, people on social media want to have a debate with me about it. Like, look, I Googled it. Here's what Google said. That's great. Google's wrong then. I'm sorry. I'm right in this instance. I'm not having a debate with anyone about it because that is exactly what would happen. And if that's not the intention of Democrats, if that wasn't the intention of the 28 Democratic senators who signed on to this, then they need to clarify and they need to add language to that constitutional amendment. If they don't add language, then that is their intent. So again, I'm not arguing about it. That's just the truth. It's not something that's open to debate or interpretation. It just is what it is. So I see this headline come into my inbox. It was published by McClatchy, so it ended up in a few newspapers, unfortunately. This is from the Olympian. It's they have a reoccurring thing called reality check. Okay, so this makes it in their reality check. The headline, are WA Dems trying to adjust the state constitution to allow, quote, abortions up to birth? And that's my line. I was the first one to put that out, that this allows abortions up to birth, because it does. So here's the first few paragraphs of this story. It says reproductive freedom and gender-affirming care would be enshrined in the state constitution under a proposed Democrat-backed amendment that's dividing lawmakers along party lines. Republicans have lodged fierce objections to Senate Joint Resolution 8204, alleging that the suggested amendment would effectively allow abortions up to birth and gender surgeries for kids at any age. Again, those are my lines. This is literally a piece of journalism. Here's what it says. That's not the case, says the resolution's prime sponsor. State Senator Vedana Slaughter, a Bellevue Democrat, said SJR 8204 just adds what's already in state law into the Washington Constitution. Quote, I do think it's important as a healthcare professional that it be the right information that people get. And that deeply concerns me that is not accurate. So this journalist, and there's nothing really else to the article. They quote a couple Republican senators saying, hey, I disagree. But nowhere in this article that's dubbed a reality check do they do a reality check on the claim made by the amendment's key sponsor, the Democratic state senator. They just literally extend their platform to her to say, well, that's not true, when it is true. It's 100% true. There's really no wiggle room. At the very least, these news outlet could have said, here is the argument being made, that this constitutional amendment would supersede existing state law and would, at the very least, set up a legal challenge to all of those state laws that regulate things like abortions, that regulate things like reproductive care. Instead, they just let the Democratic sponsors say, that's not true. And they expect us all to carry on with our day. And then they throw in a quote from Republicans just to sort of even it out, right? So what happens when a news outlet does that? When they, again, because they're publishing this in reality check. So to me, they're saying they're doing a fact check on my claim, right? Are Dems really trying to adjust the state constitution to allow abortions up to birth? Reality check. That's not the case, says the bill's prime sponsor. Yeah, you got to do a little more digging than that. Of course, the prime sponsor is going to say that's not true. So you have this media outlet, hard air quotes, and they just say, oh, it's good enough to just let the prime sponsor say that, and then we'll throw in a quote from Republicans. Well, what's going to happen when a reader reads that? What's going to happen? Most readers are going to say, well, Democrat said this and a Republican said this, so I'm going to believe the person who I'm aligned with. So Democrats read that article and came away with, oh, they're not trying to protect abortions up to birth. Republicans probably read that article and came up with, they probably are trying to get abortions up to birth because the Republicans said so. And then the news, journalism outlet washes its hands of the situation and said, we did a reality check on this. You didn't do shit. You just gave the prime sponsor of the constitutional amendment your platform to claim that it's a lie when it's not a lie. For the love of God, find a constitutional scholar if you don't believe me. Find a legal expert and have them explain the situation. It's actually not a very hard legal concept to understand. I'm not an attorney. It's not a hard argument to understand because they don't list any sort of restrictions or allow any language that gives a little wiggle room to have restrictions. They simply say the state shall not deny or interfere with these fundamental rights. What does that mean? Well, that means that the state shall not deny or interfere with these fundamental rights. That doesn't mean when you say the state shall not deny or interfere, except they're going to limit it in this way, in that way, in this way, and that way. No, that's unconstitutional. So that's what baffles me. It's not for any journalist. This isn't a difficult concept to understand. And it's not your job just to I love, quote from both sides and you think that's enough. No, you're doing a segment called Reality Check. Tell people what the truth is. Don't just present what the Republicans say and the Democrats say and wash your hands of it. Help people understand how this works. The likely legal challenges, the complexity of the situation. This is lazy at best, intentionally misleading at worst. And shame on that senator for saying it doesn't do that. All it does, what'd she say? It just adds what's already in state law to the Washington Constitution. What are you talking about? State law right now is abortions are banned after fetal viability. Let me just read that constitutional amendment again. I don't see that in there, do you? State law right now is you have to have parental consent for surgical interventions for gender affirming care. I don't see that in there, do you? So how can you literally let her just say in this article, it just adds what's already in state law to the Washington Constitution? It doesn't at all. And if that is the argument, I might say, if that's really all this does, it just adds what's already in state law to the Constitution, then you're telling me it's unnecessary. You're telling me it's redundant. If it's already state law, why would you need to go through all this effort to add it to the state constitution? Because you're a liar. You're a liar, 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 liar. And the media lets you do it.